Hey everybody, what is going on? Hexlex here with another Master Duel video for you guys. So today we're going to be taking another look at Swordsoul Tenyi post-ban list. About the time this video is coming out, should be the beginning of Season 10, with the new ban list having just rolled out. So these games that we're going to be seeing are going to be from just before that, just the a few days before the ban list came out. But nevertheless, as we've seen, of course, in the latest meta analysis, and as we talked about in recent videos, the meta right now is actually in a place, even at this state, where it's pretty much the new meta already, as we're seeing a massive drop in play of Halki-Fibrax-based decks, as well as adventure-based decks as well. Because really, when you think about it, especially when it comes to adventure decks, right? The two main ones, Adventure Pranks and Adventure Tenyi, both got hit in their own respective ways on the two recent ban lists. Of course, all adventure decks took a hit with Water Enchantress going to 1. The engine is still definitely viable. However, as a result of it getting hit at all, decks that feature it are going to be, not as popular. And honestly, the main deck that, quote-unquote main deck that I would consider using it right now is Dragon Link. That as well as Adventure Phantom Knight. And then Dragon Link, even then is like, yeah, it uses the Adventure engine, but it's definitely not necessarily a mainstay of it, whereas Adventure Phantom Knight definitely incorporates that engine about as much as other previous iterations did. So it's just, it's always interesting to see how the meta is shifting. Even now, again, at this time, it's just a few days before the new ban list is actually rolling out. My main point, I guess, is that the format right now is still similar enough that I consider this definitely good enough testing for when the actual ban list comes out. So Swordsoul Tenyi, as always as ever, is one of the most consistent decks that you can run on Master Duel Ranked Ladder, in my opinion. And consistency in a best of one format is definitely what you're looking for, because we don't have games 2 and 3. We're not playing matches, so we can't use the side decks to kind of show up our weaknesses against other decks. And as a result, you want to make sure that you're not only getting disruption every game, but also your combo pieces every game. So, normally we might not be, normally in a best of 3 format, we might not be main decking stuff like Nibiru or Harpie's Feather Duster. But in this format, obviously we definitely need to do that, as well as maybe stuff like Valor or like so many Imperms. But we're running Valor into Imperms mostly because of Branded Despia. These cards are obviously very good against Branded Despia, namely for hitting Lubellion that they get off the Branded Fusion. The reason we're playing 1 Valor into Imperm and not just 3 Imperm is for not only Crossout Designator to be able to hit Valor with it. It seems like a very minor case use. Was definitely more relevant when Designator was at 3, but it's still definitely a very, very relevant use case for the card there. So I still like to factor that in when possible when building decks, even though Designator is only at 1. But Valor also being a level 1 tuner also does make it relevant for synchro plays. It's pretty easy to special summon a Vishuda or an Ashuna, normal summon the level 1 Valor, and then go into one of your many level 8s. Or you could even, like, in some niche case scenarios, like, your Longyuan gets summoned, you summon a Swordsoul token, but maybe they pop, the Swordsoul token, and you just have the Longyuan. Then you could, like, normal the Valor and go into, like, a Yazi. Again, that's a very specific scenario, but it is just one of many ways that Valor can potentially open up plays, as well as being disruption. So it's always nice to have a little bit of versatility in that regard, as well as being consistent. Obviously we're still playing the same number of monster effect negation effects either way, but this one just offers a few more options that Imperm might not. Of course, Imperm also offers options like not being able to hit by Called By is a very important case use of Infinite Impermanence as well. So in any case here, as far as the list itself goes, it's actually not really changed much since the last season, particularly since we were testing our post-ban list build last season. Well, just a few days ago, really, but still last season at the time this video is coming out. Again, we haven't really changed the main or extra deck, honestly, at this point. I did think about it a little bit more and decided that I don't know that there's really much else besides Dragite and a 3rd Monk of the Tenyi that I would necessarily want to add. I actually really like having 3 Monk of the Tenyi the more I play with this deck, because it really lets you be liberal with Monk of the Tenyi. Before, when you were playing 2, you had to be a little bit careful because this card is often so vital to making any amount of like Tenyi-based plays, right? You have to be really careful about how you use Monk of the Tenyi and make sure that you're not burning your copies away unnecessarily, because there will be times in a longer drawn out game where, again, if you're playing 2 Monk of the Tenyi, you might, have used your other 2 already and then realize, like, oh, I need to summon something off my Ashuna in order to make a synchro play, but I can't do that because I don't have access to a normal monster because I don't have any more monks left in my extra deck. Having the 3rd Monk of the Tenyi definitely lets you, again, be a little bit more liberal. Like, for example, I might special an Ashuna and then normal summon a Mo Ye, right? And then, you know, Mo Ye's effect will activate, and then we'll do a regular combo that way. It kind of leaves you with a leftover Ashuna. You can then potentially send the Ashuna for a monk, use the Ashuna effect, something like a Vishuda from the deck, and then if you've used Adhara at any point during that combo, you can even Adhara to wheel the Ashuna back to your hand, and that way you've pretty much just gotten a free monk and Vishuda for like no cost at all. So, yeah, it can be definitely very helpful in that regard to have 3 monk, just because, again, I do consider this to be a very, very vital function of the deck, having these in the extra deck. And then again with Dragite, I mentioned this in the last time we covered this new build here, but you know, in best of 1 ranked ladder, we're seeing a lot more Eldritches than you do in like tournaments, for example, and then just in general other like stun or back row based decks, especially as the format tends to like go on, or like the season rather than the format. The season tends to go on. More people kind of tend to turn towards Eldritch when laddering, so having the option to negate spells and traps with Dragite is very useful, especially because that does tend to be this deck's one of this deck's weaknesses is it does tend to be a little bit weak to back row, particularly floodgates. That is of course also why we're playing the Harpie's Feather Duster as well. I do think it is important to play this card in this deck. Without this card, like, it's true that, like, you know, we only have the 1 Feather Duster against Eldritch, and you don't even draw it every single time, but really just having the ability to draw it, because there are enough times where it's not too difficult to just stay alive, but you're still not able to do anything under the floodgates. So like you can eventually just, you know, manage to draw into the Feather Duster. If we were playing Pot of Desires, that would be a little bit more relevant, which I have considered maybe like trying to fit them in, but honestly trying to do that and also stay at 40 cards and also play all this like disruption in tech is just a little bit much. I don't want to go over 40 cards to put in Desires. Like, I've kind of considered going up to 42 and playing 2 Desires. I've done that with this deck in the past, but I wasn't really a huge fan of it when I did. Don't get me wrong, the deck can definitely use a lot of the advantage, but I just find it's not worth it to hit the consistency. Again, I feel Swordsoul Tenyi's strongest point is that it is such a consistent deck. You are able to very, very easily replicate the same game plan every turn 1, and even through negates. It's not difficult to do that in most cases at all. So I think that's about all I've got to say about the deck. I'm pretty much just like, you know, gushing about it and singing its praises at this point. So let's go ahead and break down the list card by card before we go and take a look at some games. So we are playing 1 Effect Veiler, 3 Tenyi Spirit Adhara, 3 Maxx, 3 Ash Blossom and Joy Spring, 1 Tenyi Spirit Shthana, 3 Swordsoul of Mo Ye, 2 Swordsoul of Taia, 2 Incredible Ecclesia, the Virtuous, 3 Swordsoul Strategist Longyuan, 2 Tenyi Spirit Vishuda, 3 Tenyi Spirit Ashuna, 1 Nibiru the Primal Being, 1 Archnemesis Protos, 1 Harpie's Feather Duster, 3 Swordsoul Emergence, 2 Called by the Grave, 1 Crossout Exterminator, 2 Heavenly Dragon Circle, 2 Infinite Impermanence, and 1 Swordsoul Blackout. Extra deck is going to contain 1 Yazi Evil of the Zing, 2 Baxia Brightness of the Zing, 1 Draco Berserker of the Tenyi, 1 Adamancipator Risen Dragite, 2 Swordsoul Grandmaster Chi Xiao, 1 Chao Fang Phantom of the Zing, 1 Baronne de Fluer, 1 Swordsoul Supreme Sovereign Cheng Ying, 1 Swordsoul Sinister Sovereign, Chi... Oh, I had this earlier. It's Qi Xing Longyuan, I believe. I always hesitate on that. I don't know why. The last time, the last video, I actually got it, I think, right the first time. Whatever, anyway. Finally, we have 3 Monk of the Tenyi, and then, of course, 1 Shaman of the Tenyi. So, there we go. That is the deck list covered there. So now let's go ahead and take a look at some games. Okay, this first game here is going to be against Sky Striker. It's actually been a little bit since I've played against Sky Striker, and definitely quite a while since I've played with it. It's one of those decks that I really like Sky Striker, and I perpetually keep meaning to come back to it more often than I do, but especially as the case lately with Master Duel, which is a good problem to have, is that there's so many different like you know, pack releases and updates to the ban list happening in relatively rapid succession, that just trying to feature all these different decks and show all the different changes post like these, you know, each of these updates is definitely keeps me on my toes a bit, but I'm definitely not opposed to coming back to Sky Striker someday. So in any case here, yeah, I decided to throw out the extra Ashuna. I kind of like doing this sometimes just to like check and see if they've got like a Maxx or something. In this case, they just end up having an Ash Blossom, which was totally fine because obviously, was this the game we opened 3 Emergence? I'm pretty sure it was. Yeah, this was the game we opened all 3 of our Emergence, which is like, cool, great. We always love when that happens, but it's not necessarily the end of the world. You can definitely, you know, believe it or not, you can open worse hands. But in any case there, yeah, like I was saying, I like to throw out the Ashuna mostly to check for Maxx. It's a good way to check for it without committing to like something like Mo Ye or Taia. Because then, you know, if you use a Mo Ye or Taia, you kind of have to either awkwardly leave the Swordsoul token on the board, which I don't like doing because sometimes your opponent can, like, destroy your monsters or play around you in such a way where they leave the token up and you kind of, like, awkwardly can't link summon, which isn't really as big of a deal, you know, anymore with Halcyon and Auroradon no longer being in the deck, but still, that does sometimes hinder you with just not being able to go for the Monk there. So, in any case, like I said, we were able to do the, or I like to use the Ashuna check for Maxx. They didn't have it, so we did end up with the spare Ashuna. We'll just use it to go into Monk and Vishuda, and then we were able to wheel the Ashuna back to our hand. So it's kind of like we didn't really use the resource at all, and again, we got a couple of free extra bodies on the board. You know, as a result. And yeah, it's true that maybe a Monk of the Tenyi and an extra Vishuda might not seem like a lot, but it's like not uncommon at all for your opponent to have to spend all their resources not only fighting through but destroying like your Baron and your Chi Xiao, and leaving you with even, you know, one of these two cards going into your next turn can offer you some really good momentum moving forward, right? The Monk of the Tenyi being a non-effect monster of the board, making your Tenyi, you know, monsters always live is definitely very nice to have going into your turn. Same with the Vishuda. If that sticks around as a level 7 monster just on the board to synchro with, we definitely take those as well. So yeah, and you know, even as I said here, like at the end of the play here, all the opponent was really able to do was get rid of, again, my Monk and my Chi Xiao. Still have both the Vishuda and the Baron. So here I can even use the Vishuda just to go for the Monk. This is a pretty easy out to the Wandering Griffin Rider. I'll use the Vishuda to target the token, like on the off chance they might misclick or for some reason just let it resolve, but you know, again, by misclicking or maybe just misplaying. We like to get rid of the token because that'll not only turn off the Griffin Rider, but also get rid of the token and also the Draco back. So I got hit with a Dimensional Barrier here, which I'm pretty sure this is the first time since playing Master Duel I actually got hit with this card. I gotta be honest with you, I totally forgot the card even existed, but it makes sense, you know, since Link's being a thing, why it doesn't see more play. It really could have just said extra deck monsters and been a little bit future-proof if they wanted to make it so, but whatever. In any case here, we're still able to make some Link plays, even though they called Synchro monsters, which you might think, oh, all you have is 3 Monk and a Shaman. Like, how good are your Link plays? Better than you might think, as you can see here. We're able to use the Shaman to get rid of the Fateful Adventure, clear that off the board. And because we have the Shthana engraved, we can just use that to get rid of the Adventurer token, bring back the Monk, and then deal a little bit of extra damage. I don't think I could have done any more damage here than leaving my opponent at 1200, but it was really close. I did spend a little while just calculating all the possible different ways I could do damage, and no, without Synchro Summoning, I believe this was not only the maximum amount of damage I could do, but also like the most efficient way to just completely clear off the opponent's board. And as we can see, the opponent did not have much of a follow-up, and then we were able to secure the victory. So yeah, even when not able to Synchro Summon, again, 3 Monks and a Shaman might not look like a lot, but you know, with the assistance of Shthana, even without though just the Shaman's effect, is definitely very, very relevant and makes the Monk scarier than it might seem, a lot better than it might seem. So alright, let's go and take a look at the next game. Okay, so this game here is going to be against Baronne de Fluer. This is going to be a nice 8-turn game, so, you know, we definitely love to see the longer games, especially against, you know, the big, bad meta threat that Swordsoul Tenyi is leading the charge against. That, of course, again, being Baronne de Fluer, as, you know, of course, moving into the new format that is going to continue to be the most played and probably just best and most powerful deck of the, well, I don't know, I never want to say best because that's really subjective, right? I think most powerful while still subjective is a bit more apt to you know, describe what the top, you know, deck of any given meta is like, because best and most powerful, I consider it anyway to mean, you know, different things. It might not seem like they mean different things, but a deck's power level does not necessarily solely dictate its place in the meta. There's also, of course, the factor of representation, which we've talked about before. So, yeah, here, what did they have for the Maxx? It was an Ash or something? Yeah, it was an Ash Blossom, so kind of sucks. We just have to watch our opponent combo off at this point. Definitely doesn't help that we just have another Maxx in our hand. I'm really good at that. I'm really good at opening, like, multiple Maxx or activating Maxx, getting it to resolve, and then like the first card I draw is another Maxx, and it's like, cool, good. But of course, that's really what that is confirmation bias, right? It's just confirmation bias. Me observing all the times that did happen, you know, etc., etc. So I think the opponent might have misclicked here or something, but they ended up banishing their own Mirror Jade instead of the Alibur, or maybe they just really wanted Alibur around that much. Either way, that's totally fine with me. I mean, they can still, you know, get it back with the ad libitum. I think they ended up adding it, or is it in their graveyard? pretty sure they added it. Yeah, okay, so that last card in their hand was the ad libitum. So, yeah, even though they banished their own Mirror Jade, that doesn't mean it's, like, gone or anything. You know, they can still get it all the same. Although we do have the called by in response to the Branded Red. I forgot to point that out, actually. You might have noticed that. You might have been like, wait, Lex, you just let that Maxx resolve. Why didn't you call by it? Well, this is actually the exact reason, because I, of course, you know, being Branded Despia, I knew my opponent had a Branded Red face down, and I thought to myself, I can push through a Maxx. I can very easily potentially win through a Maxx, but if the opponent resolves that Branded in red, that's going to be a bit more of a hurdle there. The Guardian Chimera Disruption, of course, then that in addition, or not in addition to the other Maxx, because of course I call by the Maxx, but long story short, yeah, I thought the Guardian Chimera was going to mess me up more than the Maxx was in terms of finding lethal, so ultimately decided to save the call by for the Branded red, which I don't regret, even though I did not actually end up finding lethal. Because again, we were able to stop our opponent from getting that board presence, that advantage from taking away from our board presence, and we were still able to set up a Baron plus a Maxx, which, you know, against 5 cards is not like ideal, but you know, you could definitely do worse, right? So plus we do have the significant life point advantage. That doesn't always mean anything, but in Branded Despia it kind of does, because it makes Masquerade a bit more viable as like an out. It's actually kind of the case of this format overall, because it's the case with Swordsoul too, right? In this deck, we could even do it with the Sinister Sovereign, the Qixing Longyuan. So it's just kind of funny how, like, life point. I do like to say, and I still think this is true even in this format, that life points are a resource, not a scoreboard, right? Which means, basically what that means is, like, you can afford to lose life points as many as you need to, as long as you don't go down to 0. This is obviously, you know, and you might be like, duh, right? Of course that's the case, but really what I'm getting at by saying that is that, you know, it shouldn't really, as long as you're ahead, like, advantage-wise, or you have a way to come back, it doesn't really matter how low you are, right? Like, you could be at 100, but if you know you can secure the game next turn, that doesn't really matter. So in that regard, life points almost don't really matter again until they're about to hit 0, but they do matter a little bit more again in this format, because just due to the nature of, again, not only the Masquerade, the Blazing Dragon, but also the Swordsoul's Sinister Sovereign, Qixing Longyuan, life, like, random burn among top meta decks is actually like a very relevant thing, so it does pay to be mindful of life points both on your and your opponent's end, thinking about how likely is my opponent to make one of those monsters that burns a lot, how many of those, you know, effects can I resolve while getting burned and still not, you know, lose, just thinking about that kind of thing. Let's see here. So yeah, we end up drawing a Taia here, which is definitely perfect, because now that means I can search up the Longyuan here, and then I'm able to use the effect to summon a level 10 Synchro in addition to this Qi Shao. Up till this point, I was just kind of trying to figure out what I was going to do with Qi Shao alone, and trying to be like, ooh, I don't know if I can manage to get, not lethal necessarily, but even a solid board just going with that. And here I debate a little while whether to go for the Cheng Ying or the Sinister Sovereign, but I end up going for the Cheng Ying. It's gonna put us like just short of lethal, 200 points even. Definitely so close. But all the same, I ended up going with this because I thought it would be a little bit more relevant as disruption. If I had gone for the Sinister Sovereign, right, then, let's see, I'm just trying to think, 2,900 over, what was it, 18, so that would have been 11, opponent was at, how many life points were they at? It was, oh, I can't find it in here, shoot. I think it was 3,800? In any case, yeah, it would have been enough that they could have activated 2 card effects and still been alive. At that point, they could have just played through our Sinister Sovereign and still had enough life points to continue making plays. So, of course, the banishing could have very easily disrupted them as well, but banishing without negates does make it a little bit more difficult. Of course, that's what Cheng Ying does as well, but again, I decided to go for it because Cheng Ying not only does more damage in this case, but also just has a bit more of a presence, right? The ability to not only protect itself through its own effects, but banish cards from both the opponent's field and graveyard, do it on their turn and my turn. I think you just end up being the more solid option. Now here, I find myself like ripping the call by, initially being disappointed, like, oh, it's not a monster. Any monster would have been lethal. But then I realized, oh wait, this is lethal. I can call by banish a Guardian Chimera by banishing one of my opponent's cards. I should have banished the Aliber here. Misplay on my part. Misplay. I should have used the call by on the Aliber. Then it wouldn't have come back here. Even though my opponent had multiple copies in the graveyard, you know, its effects would have been negated for the rest of the turn. Also would have been smart because then my opponent could have just like normal summoned an Aliber and gone for plays here. So for multiple reasons, I should have hit that with the call by, but all the same, you know, I can just normal the Shthana. I'll make a Monk of the Tenyi, and then, you know, I could just even use the normal Shthana, but I think going for the Monk is like slightly better than just leaving the Shthana out here. In any case, yeah, that's enough for the opponent to concede, as we then have lethal. So should have been on my last turn that we actually got the lethal, but all the same, we're able to push through a going second game where our Maxx got disrupted, but we're still able to come back even after Baronne de Fluer got their setup. So, all right, let's go take a look now at the next game. All right, this is going to be yet another game against Baronne de Fluer. However, this time we're playing against the adventure variant. So, always nice to see these different variants of Baronne de Fluer. It's interesting, if the data on Master Duel meta is to be believed, then this variant only sees 10% of play, which I personally find a little difficult to believe. I mean, I know that's more across like tournaments and ranked ladder, but maybe it's just on a ranked ladder that, you know, it would have to be on ranked ladder because, you know, the adventure build tends to be more popular among players in, you know, like where the OCG is played, like in Japan, whereas, you know, the tournaments are mainly played from people, as far as my understanding, like where the TCG is played, like in North America, South America, Europe, again, just all the countries where the TCG is played, again, just due to the nature of being on a more TCG focused website, so to speak. So in that regard, the data does tend to get skewed a little bit in that way as well. That's always the important thing with Master Duel meta and just any amount of data. Honestly, any amount of data in general. You really just need to be mindful of the factors that make that data up. You can't just take the result and be like, this is the definitive answer, right? You can't just see like, oh, only 10% of the, again, it's more correct to say, because it's like the actual statistic is that 90% of the Baronne de Fluer decks are playing the Fright for engine. Therefore, that is the correct build to play because, again, specifically, it's seeing 90% representation on Master Duel meta. You know, again, you got to figure that if you're just thinking about best of one, that format or that figure is not necessarily 90%. Just keeping all the factors in mind there, as always, as ever. So, yeah, our opponent got a Guardian Chimera off on us and managed to disrupt our plays. We managed to get as far as we did without even normal summoning. So I definitely did that intentionally, saving the Mo Ye for last, as that is like going to be the main way to go into our the bulk of our plays. You know, even with just this last Mo Ye plus Adhara, we can still go for Chi Xiao plus Baron, which will let us blow up the Guardian Chimera because the opponent does not have a polymerization in their graveyard. Being the adventure build, we know they don't play poly, so we don't have to worry about that. We can target this Guardian Chimera as much as we want with Baron, and then of course also have the Omni Negate up. We're not going to be able to get lethal quite this turn, which is, you know, obviously we'd like to be able to do that if possible, but, you know, beggars can't be choosers. We still have a really good setup here. Opponent's going to throw out their Griffin to tank a little bit of damage. That's totally fine here. Or so I thought they were just doing it to tank damage, but then they flip up the Super Polymerization. But fortunately, all they go for here is the Mud Dragon of the Swamp, which they did manage to get rid of the Baron, so no more Omni Negate for me, but this is still a fine result for me, as the opponent is now left with no resources. I've got a Crossout Designator and the Negate from Chi Xiao, so even if they like rip a Branded Fusion or something, I can still just, you know, negate the Lubellion with the Chi Xiao. I'm not super duper concerned. And then if they have another like generic, you know, if they had top decked another generic kind of card, I could have played Crossout Designator, but they top decked the Foolish Burial, which they then go for and activate the Rite of Artemis here, which I don't really particularly understand because they have the Griffin Rider and the Draco back both in the graveyard. At this rate, it's definitely better to just save it for discard fodder, honestly. Like, it really is. It might seem weird that it might seem weird that is the case. Try saying that 5 times fast, but no, yeah, because they go for the Lubellion here, but they don't have a card to discard, which I think it might have been like a reflex thing, like, oh, you activate the Braided Fusion, you just automatically go for Lubellion. That's why you've always got to be mindful of your plays, you know. Again, had the opponent taken the time to realize, like, oh, I don't have access to Griffin Rider or Draco back. My Adventure Engine is only going to get me a 2000 token, which against a G Shao doesn't do anything. So, and you need the card to discard for Lubellion. So, had they saved that, I mean, again, had they saved that, we would have, still Chi Shao and negated the Lubellion. It wouldn't have been a big deal, but just always important to be mindful and not go on autopilot like that. So, okay, we've got one more game to take a look at. Let's go ahead and go straight into it. All right, last duel of this video is also going to be one last send-off to Adventure Tenyi, as we did actually end up playing it against it one last time here before the end of the season. So somebody looking to just ladder with it, get one last kick. I don't blame them. Again, I've said this before. Like, yes, Halki Fibrex did need to go. I agree with and understand that, but honestly, you know, I did really like playing Adventure Tenyi. I cannot lie. As well as Adventure Pile. The Halcdon lines were just... they were fun. I had fun playing them. Again, won't lie. So, as always with this deck, you know, this information isn't really particularly relevant anymore, but it's best to wait until they drop the Auroradon to disrupt, if possible, because a lot of builds, most builds, are only playing one Auroradon. So, if you stop the Hulk, they can potentially still go for a number 42 Galaxy Tomahawk and then go for the Auroradon. But then if you wait for the Auroradon and negate that, then they won't have any more combos from there. So like here, yeah, we negate the Auroradon. Opponent doesn't have any option but to set a card and pass. So our hand's looking pretty solid here. I'm going to leave the Vishuda into the Monk and bounce the face down card. I usually like to do this if I have Vishuda plus other stuff to do. I don't need the Vishuda to combo, just to be able to get rid of some back row and make sure that the opponent isn't able to disrupt us. I think that's really important. I don't see a lot of people doing it when they have the ability to. Like, I've seen games where my opponent will you know, just kind of play into my back row. I'll flip it, and then later they end up showing me that they have a Vishuda, and it's like, well, wait, you could have Vishuda into Monk and bounced my back row, and I would have been screwed. But yeah, whatever. In any case, here, opponent does have an Ash Blossom for Chi Shao, so that's definitely annoying. We're not able to then set up our Longyuan, but we do have the Protos here, and our opponent didn't even give us time to drop the Protos, they just conceded. So that's definitely a very satisfying way to say goodbye to Adventure Tenyi. Again, I like the deck, but I do have to admit, it definitely did need to go there. So, alright, that's it for the gameplay. Let's go ahead and move now to the outro. Alright, everybody, I want to thank you all for watching all the way to the very end of the video like this. That means a lot to not only me personally, but is also a great way of supporting the channel. I also am appreciative of those of you who are leaving comments and subscribing. Again, both mean a lot to me personally and are great ways to support the channel. Comments, as always, as ever, I am looking for suggestions as far as the build goes. I haven't actually published that first video or that last video where I updated the build yet as the time of recording this video. So unfortunately, if you have left feedback there, I've not been able to apply it yet, but that doesn't mean I'm not reading it. And I'm definitely going to be taking it into account moving forward, as well as feedback I get on this video when, you know, updating this build for the, not just for the channel, but just for playing it, because that's the thing with builds. I think that's, you know, I don't like sitting on one static build. I don't like, you know, rotating cards in and out all the time necessarily, like between every single video, but I think it's important to just, you know, be mindful of what tech is important at any given time. Even mid-season, that can definitely change as the format changes. And also just, you know, keeping an open mind for suggestions in general, I think is important to do. Plus, you know, you all have definitely helped me a lot in the past understand things about decks that I've overlooked. So suffice it to say, I trust your guys' opinion. But yeah, that's going to do it for today's video. That's all the time we got for today. So without further ado, this is XLex signing out. I hope you guys have a fantastic day.